Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 63 of the Memorial Memo, KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Phoenix Stevens, and today I'm excited to talk about some portal stuff. Of course, this time of year, I joke about this because I am very fortunate to be able to do the job that I am doing, but I've kind of joked around here in the last couple of days that my favorite time of the year, which is March Madness and, watching Kentucky make a tournament run, is immediately followed by my least favorite time of the year, which is the transfer portal and all this, garbage that, I have to trying to figure out if someone's staying, they're leaving, you got to figure out who's Kentucky going after all this stuff. But it can be exciting, and I'm certainly glad to be on here today. So I say we get down right to it. Now, before we get to the portal and all that stuff, I do want to talk about this past season. I haven't had the chance to do a full sit-down, just recap of this basketball season. And, I just want to talk about how, first of all, Kentucky goes 25-11, makes it to the Sweet 16 for the first time in a decade. I think it goes without saying, just clearly, I think this season was a successful season for Kentucky. For the most part, there were times when, especially when Tiani Key was out, there were times when, Kentucky, you felt like they lost some games that they probably should have won. But, I think, again, for the most part, it was a good year. I was really... I'm fond of the five seniors. I remember before the South Carolina game, I did the whole senior day thing and talked about all the five seniors. But, I think something we'll remember about this team, for one, I feel like this may be overblown as like a media person talking about the grandeur and the big picture stuff. But, this team and really these 2-year seniors, Amelia Hassett, Jordan Obi, I'll include, and Tiani Key, help pave the way for this era that we're about to go. It almost feels like, it almost feels like the real Kenny Brooks era is gonna start this season, right? Because Georgia Amore is a Virginia Tech leftover, right? You see the pieces that he brings from Virginia Tech, and it felt like there was a lot of that Virginia Tech vibe kind of still these last two seasons, even though. Tiani Key didn't play there, right? Amelia didn't play there, obviously. But I felt like there was kind of the Virginia Tech imprint to help get the program started. And now it's this, you got 3 McDonald's All-Americans. And yes, Clara Stratt came from Virginia Tech, but she really got rolling here. And, it's her senior year here, right? Asia Boone, you bring her in, right? I think heading into this next season, it's really, all right, Kenny's got his Kentucky blueprint on the program now, right? He's got his next point guard. He's got these star recruits, high school teammates in Emily McDonald and Savvy Swords, who we're going to talk about in a minute. It feels like this last year was sort of here's the foundation, this bottom ground that we can kind of build up upon. And again, I think it was a good year. I look at the schedule right here above me, and I just think of some of my favorite moments throughout the year, right? Third game into the season, Kentucky plays at Buffalo. And, of course, that ended up, Kentucky wins that game handily. It's the homecoming game for Clara Stratt. I went to the game on November 15th at Marshall. That was cool, right? Kentucky hosts Purdue, hosts a big-time visitor that game, and Kentucky just throttles Purdue. I think it was kind of the first, even though Purdue wasn't great, it was the first big environment that we had this season. The next game, Kentucky goes on the road and beats Louisville for the second year in a row, right? Again, Jeff Walz and that Louisville Cardinals team just beat the crap out of Kentucky for the last decade, really. And, these last 2 years, Kenny Brooks, when he was at Virginia Tech, his last few years there, he'd kind of starting to beat Jeff a little bit. He started to beat Louisville a little bit. I know they beat them in the ACC Tournament Championship, gotten them a couple times before that, and that has carried over here. And, I talk about Amelia Hassett and Tiani Key. Those two finish their Kentucky careers 2-0 against Louisville, right? They both had big games both years against Louisville. I keep on looking down the schedule. You go play at Miami in the ACC SEC Challenge, and you beat them handily, right? SEC play, of course, starts off with a bang, right? Probably the top moment of the year, if I'm just thinking about it. Kentucky beats LSU on the road. They're ranked number 5 at the time, and Tony Morgan hits the game winner, right? Again, I think we'll remember like that game and that moment. Again, Kentucky's 15-1. It really felt like, man, we're on top of the world. We got to number 6 in the AP poll, and of course, Tiani gets hurt the next game against Missouri on January 4th, and then you lose to Alabama, and then January 11th, you just happen to beat Oklahoma, like number 5 Oklahoma at home without Tiani Key, right? They're like, I don't know if they're the top rebounding team in the country, but they're certainly top 2 or 3. And then you, even without your 6'5" forward, you're able to win that game. That was a magical game too, because man, and just thinking about specific moments from the year, I think Tony gets this and 1-3, and she's laying on the floor and like literally just like laying on her back on the floor, and Jordan Obi's like celebrating with her. Kind of rewind a little bit to the LSU game. Again, my favorite clip of the entire season. Probably a lot of people's favorite clip from the season because nobody likes LSU, to be quite frank with you, where I think it's Jada Richard who gets the and one on Tony Morgan, and Tony Morgan kind of falls down. And like very clearly, Jada Richard kind of looks down at Tony Morgan on the ground, and I'm pretty sure, like if you read her lips, she says like, "Get your ass up." And literally, and then there, I want to say it's Michaela Williams who's like celebrating, going down the court, hyping up the crowd. And there's this video online. I'm sure you all have seen it. I think it's like the Titanic music or something. I can't remember what it is, played over it. And Tony Morgan just hits the game winner, and that place goes from being a frenzy to like the most depressing place in the world. And I think it was even all the more sweet because that was the game where, of course, this is New Year's Day that we're talking about. Lane Kiffin just got hired at LSU. So, like, Kim Mulkey comes out holding his hand like, I don't know, like it's Mike Tyson walking out there. Like, I don't know, like Lane Kiffin's the Undertaker and she's Paul Bear. Like, it was a whole thing. And then you beat them in that big crowd. That was awesome. And then, like I said, the Oklahoma game where Tony hits the and 1-3. That Florida game, that next game on January 15th, like Kentucky wins. I want to say it's 94-89, and like that was a great game objectively. It shouldn't have never been that close, but it was a great game. And then of course, you just keep looking down the schedule here. Tiani Key comes back February 1st against Arkansas. I don't like to talk about the losses. You remember the Tennessee game kind of right before Tiani comes back. And, I guess one of the more, like in the grand scheme, not really that big because Tennessee kind of sucked and it didn't really matter for us, I don't think, a ton. The Tony Morgan pass to like Talasia Cooper's feet at Tennessee to lose that game. Just thinking of some of the big moments from the year. The 2 Vanderbilt games were both awesome games that Kentucky just couldn't pull out. The Ole Miss game on February 15th up there. That Ole Miss game, it's funny because neither team ended up hosting. But going to that game, we were like, oh, well, whoever wins is going to host, and this is going to be awesome. And just the way Kentucky dominated that game, I think, again, looking at this, between Oklahoma and Ole Miss, those were the best crowds Kentucky had all year. And right in South Carolina, last game of the season was sold out, and that was a great crowd. Georgia Amore comes home. We all see her for the first time in forever. Felt really good to see Georgia Amore, obviously, after her ACL injury, right? I mean, I know she wasn't out there hooping, but like it's just nice to see her, right, back in Lexington, still around the program. SEC tournament, Kentucky makes it. They start on a Wednesday, make it to Friday, and then, of course, the Sweet 16 run. Kenny Brooks plays or coaches against his alma mater and the team where he first started coaching at James Madison, right? You beat them, and then that next game, again, you think about defining moments of the year, best games of the year, West Virginia, second round of the NCAA tournament, right? 74-73. Just a game that, for the people that want to say women's basketball, women's basketball this, women's basketball that was an awesome basketball game, right? For the people who want to say the product sucks or it's boring or blah, 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 that proved to you women's basketball is an entertaining product. And it's not like that's an outlier, right? For the people on the men's side who want to point to that and be like, that's one game. Well, there's every sport has great games, bad games, but generally it's a good product. And like you saw Kentucky, West Virginia, it was an awesome product. And the way Kentucky won that game, it was just special. That weekend, I'm in Morgantown, and there's this buzz in the city because I didn't realize this. The furthest West Virginia had ever made in the NCAA tournament was the Sweet 16 in 1992. So they were sitting there thinking, well, we're about to have our best season in program history. And by the way, they just had their best crowd in program history that game against Miami of Ohio in the first round. And, at Hope Coliseum, beautiful venue, the uppers are normally closed off for women's games, and it's packed to the rafters, right? Like, they could reach up and touch heaven, right? That's how high they were. And Kentucky just wins that game in the most magical way possible, right? There's, of course, here at KSR, I think we all know we're fans of the programs around here, right? I pump my fist and cheer real loud. I think some NCAA guy behind me who I'm never probably going to see again is like, sir, there's a reminder, there's no cheering on press row. I blacked out when Kentucky won that game. Of course, the official blows the whistle at the very end. I thought we fouled and we were going to get screwed. But regardless, Kentucky wins that game. And, again, just the season as a whole, right? I don't remember when the last 25-win season was, right? Probably been about a decade as well. I just think this team, and even the year before, these first 2 years of Kenny Brooks, it's just set the stage for, okay, this is not only what we can expect moving forward, but this is our launching pad, right? This is what we can be, 2-3 years down the line and better, right? I think Kenny Brooks has very much established the fact that, I think when he got here, he talked, obviously talked about how Kentucky's a sleeping giant, this and that, but there was a press conference one day, and someone talked about how he had done, and he's like, well, we're setting our own standard here, and that's what he's done. And I think all in all, it was just a really successful, first 2 years, and especially this past year, right? Tony Morgan, I think it's safe to say, Tony Morgan was a great kid, great point guard, obviously. I think she was the perfect bridge between Georgia Amore, Madden Greenway. Now that the season's over, I guess we can kind of talk about it all openly, right? I feel like watching the game sometimes you could see Tony, I don't know if her head was totally in it. I feel like emotionally she was halfway invested sometimes, halfway in, halfway out. But I think overall you have to be pleased with what Tony Morgan gave you, right? Amelia Hassett, if we had another year of Amelia Hassett, we'd feel really good about ourselves because that's a big piece you have to replace. Same thing with Tiani Key. Both great kids, obviously, great culture pieces. And I just think with all the seniors, man, and really that whole team last year, these are the kind of things you can build around to hopefully make a Final Four run, whether it be next year or a couple years from now. So I'm not super big on letter grades. I saw someone on Twitter put B+, I think, for the past season. I think that's fair. I might go as high as A-, because you did make the Sweet 16 for the first time in a decade. And ultimately, we look at what you do in March is kind of the biggest part of the season, obviously. So I feel really good about this past Kentucky women's basketball season. Definitely not a failure, not anything like that. You did have 11 losses, right? You do feel like this team probably had the potential to go further. I remember my preseason prediction had them in the Elite Eight. But again, that's, when you consider the circumstances, everything that happened this season, I think overall a pretty good year. Now, real quick, want to give a quick shout to our friends over at Rollback for sponsoring today's episode. You can change the game with Rollback, a proud partner of KSR. Get the best fit and the best feel with their incredibly comfortable activewear. From polos and quarter zips to shorts and Delta Performance pants, you will look good and feel good with Rollback. Use promo code KSR for 20% off your first purchase at rollback.com. It was a good year. It was, I had the awesome joy of getting to cover, again, like a special group. And I'm going to really look forward to following, say, Tony Morgan's journey, Tony Key's journey, even Josie Gilvin or Jordan, like all of them. It's going to be fun, and I hope they all come back, and I hope they know BBN loves them to absolute death. Now, to kind of segue into the future just a little bit, this past weekend, but we're nearing the weekend. Earlier this week, I guess would be the proper thing to say here, Kentucky signees Madden Greenway, Savvy Swords, and Emily McDonald all participated in the McDonald's All-American game. Of course, we getting breaking news? What am I looking at? We are. We have breaking news as of literally right now. Kentucky's Elsa Vadfors is planning on entering the transfer portal. So, okay, there we go. That's one thing. Steven, do me a favor while you're listening to this. Text Zach right now and tell him to get that article going for me. So, in the middle of the podcast, I'm trying to talk. My face is probably getting red because I didn't expect that news to hit right now. I wasn't really expecting it at the second. Elsa Vadvers hits the transfer portal as I'm trying to talk about these McDonald's All-Americans. I can't say that I really expected too much out of Elsa here. I remember when Kentucky landed a commit from her. I'd never heard of her. And I kind of go to research her, and she averaged like 2 points a game at, some club team in Sweden. It makes sense that she didn't end up panning out. Like, I had heard there was a long-term plan with Elsa Vadfors. I had heard that, they were looking, to maybe try to develop her, try to see if it worked, and it just didn't. I know, too, I know Kenny and the staff, obviously, again, when you lose someone like Clara Silva, 6'7" is just hard to replace. That size is hard to find. So, they go out and try to get Elsa Vadfors. Obviously, best of luck to her. Like, I hope she can go transfer somewhere and do all right. But I don't know if it was going to work here. I know there was a long-term plan they were hoping to do. At the end of the day, I don't think this loss kind of really kills you. So, glad I had that pulled up. So, Elsa Vadfors transfers. Now, back to what I was talking about, the McDonald's All-Americans before the news randomly hit. Madden Greenway, Savvy Swords, Emily McDonald. First of all, how about Emily McDonald? Right? She, wins the three-point contest and just looks absolutely awesome. And, from talking to people who cover the high school stuff a lot closer than me, and, at the end of the day, just like know Emily McDonald more than me, right? Like ESPN's Shane Laughlin, I didn't talk to him, but like he said, or they quoted him on the broadcast talking about how, Emily McDonald might be the best shooter in the 2026 recruiting class. And obviously that's exciting, but I think we saw that, right? So the 3-point shootout, Sprite Jam Fest the night before on Monday, I guess it was, she puts up, 23 points to win the girls' 3-point contest. And I'll be honest, I thought that was it. I was like, oh, Emily McDonald, won the girls' competition. Cool. I'll sit here and watch the boys one. And then Jason Crow Jr., who, if you all here follow men's recruiting, I imagine a lot of you do, was a Kentucky target for a while and commits and signs with Missouri. he wins the boys 3-point contest. And I'm just sitting there watching. I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. And then they go to interview Emily McDonald again. And I'm like, okay, this is odd. Okay. And, Emily McDonald, Jason Crow Jr., they're about to go at it in this, boys versus girls shootout. And I'm sitting there thinking, all right, let's just see how this goes. And Emily McDonald shoots first. She scores 18. And I'm like, all right. I feel all right about this. Jason Crow Jr. didn't have a great first round, so maybe she can win this whole thing. And, he's kind of struggling through the first 4 racks or so, and then he gets to that last rack, and, he just starts making them, and then he misses, the last 1 or 2, and Emily McDonald wins. So I'm really happy for her, obviously, to do that on that stage. I thought it was funny. Luha, which is, Lutheran High, the team Savvy Swords and Emily McDonald play for in high school, immediately left the McDonald's All-American game to go play in the Chipotle Nationals. And Emily McDonald's hitting threes over there. So that was fun. Savvy Swords also had a really big game today. But back to the McDonald's game specifically, I thought, first of all, we got to stop. I know it's a high school exhibition all-star game. We have got to chill on the ball hogging just a little bit. We've got to relax on, Sanaya Hall, I think, took 150,000 shots in that McDonald's All-American game. I don't know that to be a fact, but it sure felt like 150,000 at least. And then you sit and you watch, and, like it's the Final Four or something. Madden Greenway is just taking charges left and right. And I'm like, that's my point guard. That's who I want in blue and white. Madden Greenway is just she's taking charges. She had a really nice pull-up jumper. She's hustling on defense, right? She's making these beautiful, beautiful passes. Savvy Swords, I thought, I got a good feel of Savvy Swords. I've seen Madden play in person. You kind of know Emily McDonald's a shooter. But I hadn't seen Savvy play in person, and I was like, what am I going to get here? I knew she could shoot the ball decently well, and I've watched some film on her, obviously. But, man, she can bully you around if she wants to. So I almost want to say she's like Jordan Obi with a more consistent three-point shot, in the way that she can kind of bully down low. Right? There was that video of her today, and, there's a video, she's and lays it up. And, I feel good about these 3 McDonald's All-Americans. It's going to be really fun. And again, watching them play in the McDonald's game was really fun, really awesome. Again, Madden Greenway, I thought she was great taking charges and stuff. And then Emily McDonald hits a 3, Savvy Swords. Made some smart cuts, too. I didn't really bring that up. But obviously, I talked about her ability to kind of will her way down low and everything like that. Well, she also made just good cuts and made smart plays. I think Savvy, I think is a really hard-working player, works to get the ball and, is rewarded with points a lot of the time. So really looking forward to watching those 3 this next season. So we're going to get into the actual, stay-go portal stuff now. Obviously, in the middle of the podcast, I figured something was just going to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen, but I just figured, something. It's too good to be true for me to have a nice, fun podcast. So, Elsa Vadfors hits the portal. We've got Claire Strack back. We know that. After the Texas game, Kenny Brooks, he said it twice, essentially, and asked around, figured out she had already re-signed her deal to return next season. So, it's addition through retention, right? A lot of people, I don't think anyone really expected Clara Strack to leave, but there was this kind of discussion about, just is someone going to offer her more money? And I kind of talked around, and it sounds like, maybe she could have made more money somewhere else, but I think she just loves Kentucky, loves Kenny Brooks a whole lot, and even might have been willing to take a little bit of a pay cut to stay, right? Just kind of my feel on the situation. Maybe took a little bit of a pay cut to help Kentucky get, 3 McDonald's All-Americans and some transfers incoming. Obviously, you won't have Elsa Vadfors, so she's really the only true big on the team right now. So I think it'll be interesting to see what Kentucky does in the portal. If they, do they even bother getting another big? We'll figure that out, obviously, over the course of the next week or so. Is it really going to matter, right? Again, I'm just glad to hear and figure out that Clara Strack will be back. Now, obviously, I thought, I didn't think Elsa Vadfors is leaving yet. I thought this would be the only portal entry we'd be talking about at the moment. Lexi Blue is expected to enter the transfer portal. She announced that herself on Instagram. Top 40 recruit who just really couldn't get playing time, right? She was a Virginia Tech commit and then follows Kennedy, Kentucky, obviously. I kind of hate it for her because, I feel like with Lexi Blue, she could have gotten more playing time, could have had more time to figure things out in the ACC at Virginia Tech. It's not as deep. It's not quite as talented. Maybe she could have got, instead of, 8 minutes a game, maybe she could have got 15 minutes a game her freshman year. And maybe her sophomore year, she can get another minutes bump and can kind of start to get more playing time, really find out her role. She had one game this year. She went like 6 of 6 from beyond the arc, and it was really fun to watch. But I think, unfortunately, that's really her only kind of big Kentucky moment. Of course, I've had the pleasure of interviewing her from time to time. She's a great kid. Awesome culture piece, I think. She was just from what I've seen, I think she's a friend of everybody on the team, right? I don't think this is a personal thing at all. It's more, there's that saying, it's not personal, it's personnel, right? And at the end of the day, with 3 McDonald's All-Americans coming in, and yes, one's a point guard, but all 3 are guards. And Asia Boone's coming back, Kaylin Carroll's coming back. You couldn't really find the minutes for Lexi Blue. I think it would have been great to have her back as a depth piece, obviously, but when you're a former top 40 recruit like Lexi Blue and you're heading into your junior year of college now, you don't really want to hear that you're a depth piece, right? She obviously wants to make a push to maybe play in the pros, and you can't do that averaging 5 to 10 minutes a game. So, salute to Lexi Blue. I hope she has a heck of a career elsewhere. Hopefully she doesn't go to a team where we have to play against her, because that's never fun. But, with Lexi, just a great kid. I think can be a good player on another team. It just unfortunately wasn't really going to work here. Now, the part that you all are still tuned in for, I'm very sure. The scuttlebutt, the news, the what has Phoenix heard, what do we need to know, kind of parts of the transfer portal. I would tell you, number one, keep in mind the things I'm about to say. There's a reason the only article I've put out is that Clara Strack article, okay? And that's because I'm operating in a space where, first of all, the transfer portal doesn't open until the 6th, okay? Like, the transfer portal isn't even open yet. So everything is still unfolding. Pretty sure player meetings for Kentucky are ongoing this week. I'm pretty sure that's what I've heard, right? Things are just happening. And I get it. We are BBN. We love our news. Listen, I want to know the news. I want to know what's going on. But we're in the process of just figuring that out right now, right? I'm going to go over some potential transfer portal targets with you all. But I'd keep in mind, there's going to be a lot more kids to enter, right? As we saw with Elsa Vadfors, there are kids entering the transfer portal right now, right? So we can't sit here and get comfortable, and I can't sit there and say, well, these are defined targets. With all these kids, I will say no one has directly said, hey, Kentucky's contact. Well, first of all, until the portal opens, Kentucky officially can't contact a kid. That's against the NCAA rules. But, I can't say, oh, for sure this is a Kentucky target just yet, right? I can go off of context clues and everything like that, which I'm doing with this, but just want to say again, just walk into this with some caution, have a grain of salt, have a pinch of salt in your hand, and let's talk about the transfer portal a little bit. So I was operating under the assumption that obviously we had heard Lexi Blue was entering the transfer portal. Heading into this podcast, I was operating under the inclination that she would be the only player to enter the portal. Obviously that right now is obviously not true because Elsa Vadfer has just entered. So again, this is why I don't put articles out until things are like doubly confirmed. Elsa Vadfers and Lexi Blue, really kind of just last month of the season, when you're starting to think about, well, who could enter the transfer portal from Kentucky, those are the two names that everyone was kind of thinking, right? Those are the two names that, again, because Elsa was never really going to play, I don't think. And Lexi, you look at the depth chart, she's at the bottom. And, those are the two names that make sense. So you go look at Kentucky's roster. There are 8 players on the roster now at the moment, counting Gabby Brooks, obviously. So that's really 7 rotational players that you have. So when you look at that, that tells me Kenny Brooks, assuming they all come back. Everything I have heard to this point, and obviously as we just learned with Elsa Vadfers, this stuff is not set in stone just yet, right? Other schools can get involved. They can just flip their decisions. Like, I hate to sit here and say this stuff is fluid because it just really is. The transfer portal is just a big mess, right? But what I would say to you all is Lexi Blue and Elsa Vadfers are entering the portal. I would think at this moment in time, and April 2nd, 6:33 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, I would say those are the only 2 players from Kentucky that are entering the transfer portal. That is not scoop, that is scuttlebutt. I am making that differentiation right now, right? Just based on the things I've heard, I don't see Asia Boone leaving. I don't see Kaylin Carroll leaving. I don't see Dom Perova leaving. I don't see anyone else leaving. That could change. I will let you all know on KS Board when that happens. And by the way, you should go subscribe to KSR Plus right now if you aren't. First of all, it's 50% off. Second of all the new, everything you're going to want to know is right over there. So, again, I would just say go subscribe. And again, go look at KSR Plus. So, the transfer portal targets, the potential ones, right? Again, these are not people that Phoenix Stevens has heard are coming to Kentucky. This is not, Kentucky's contacted them. This is not even confirmed anything. But based off context clues, based off of just conversations with people just around the country, and different roles in this whole thing, these are just some people that I personally would just tell you all to just keep an eye on, right? I think we'll get an idea of confirmed portal targets once the portal opens, but as of April 2nd, these are just some names I would tell you all to keep an eye on. So right now, and it's a good list I have going on here, so I'll start with Pania Davis, Florida State Seminoles junior center, would actually be heading into her senior year, 6'6" from Washington State. She obviously, it's a big question of, does Kentucky want to go get a 6'6" girl, right? Do they want to get a backup center and something that we've talked about a lot on KS Board? Do they want to slide Claire Strack to the 4, right? We'll have to see about that. That's one I'd keep an eye on. I know Josh Peterson has very many ties to that state. He obviously coached at Miami. I think he was if I remember right off the top of my head, I think he was an assistant at Florida State back in the day. I would just keep an eye on her. Lauren Hurst out of Tennessee. There's a couple Tennessee kids. You got Lauren Hurst and then Denia Prawl. 2 of those kids, they were 2025 recruits that went to Tennessee. We all saw how Tennessee just completely fell apart. And a lot of those kids are entering the portal. I would expect those two to be names to keep out, monitor for Kentucky. Obviously, Kentucky recruited them both, and again, I think they could fit needs that this team might need. Chloe Spreen out of Indiana is another one as well. I heard last offseason Kentucky, might have looked at her briefly. You go look at her stats, and there's not too much to say there. Would be heading into her senior year, right? 5'10" guard. But again, with this Kentucky team, I think you're kind of looking at depth pieces that you might need. Boston University, big graduate transfer, Annette Adler. So she's already in the port. Kentucky could actively be recruiting her right now. From Estonia, 6'5" grad senior. Again, I would keep like the big names, like the big stat producers that are 6'5" plus at the mid-major level. Kentucky could be going after some of those kids, right? You have Harper Peterson at Stanford, right? She, is entering the portal, can shoot the ball, 6'4", kind of feels like the obvious Amelia Hassett replacement. Again, you just look around the portal, like, again, 6'4", can shoot the ball, coming from a power conference school like Stanford, makes some sense there. Louisville has two kids I'd keep an eye on, Isla Jeffermans and Anaya Hardy. Both of those kids are planning to enter the portal. Both, you look at them. Those are two names I'd keep an eye on. Florida State has another one, Sol Williams, who I'd keep an eye on. Peyton Bradley out of Louisville as well, actually. Kentucky briefly recruited her. She even took an unofficial visit to Kentucky. I think there was some conversation, was Kentucky going to offer her? And I think if she was offered, she probably would be a Kentucky Wildcat. I think it came down to Kentucky not being able to promise, playing time, not being able to promise a defined role. And I don't know what Jeff Walls in Louisville promised her necessarily. More money, I don't know. But she went to Louisville, is now planning on entering the transfer portal. So, she visited, right? She was being briefly recruited. I want to say Lindsey Hicks and Kenny Brooks, they went on a big recruiting trip. I think they stopped by Meade County to watch her. So I think that could be one. Lanny Grant out of North Carolina could be a name. The big name I'm keeping my eye on at the moment would be Ayanna Sarah-Darrington, who played at Central Michigan this season. And to kind of go into her more in depth, because I heard from somebody, this is not scoop, this is scuttle, but I've heard from somebody that she could be someone Kentucky she could be someone Kentucky looks at, right? She is heading into her junior year, averaged 15.7 rebounds per game at Central Michigan, 6'2" forward. She can't shoot the three, so that would be the one thing that would make you a little hesitant on her. She went to Frederick Douglass High School in Lexington. She's from the area. I'm pretty sure after the Central Michigan game, when Kentucky played them, Kenny talked about Darrington a little bit. Not like in great length, but brought her up. So it's a name that staff knows, right? I think if you're Kentucky, she is someone, if you're BBN, someone to keep an eye on, because it just makes a lot of sense. If she could shoot threes, I would almost tell you it might be like a near lock that Kentucky would at least eye her. But again, we won't know any of this stuff officially. This is all like speculating, right? Because we just want to know names. This is all pretty much just speculating, trying to figure out, okay, who's Kentucky, who could they go after? I will go ahead, because someone requested this on Twitter, go over my starting five prediction for next year as well, right? I think about the pieces Kentucky's bringing in, and the pieces obviously I expect them to retain. I would say heading into next season, I don't think the entire starting five is currently in Lexington or supposed to end up in Lexington yet, right? I would say Madden Greenway. To me, Madden Greenway is for sure your starting point guard. Again, number 10 kid in the class, number 9, whatever it was, has, again, a good McDonald's game as well. I think this is Kenny Brooks. I think this is going to be his next Georgia Amore in terms of, okay, you're my point guard for the next 4 years, but this is also, all right, Madden Greenway, you're my next Georgia Amore, but just being honest, you have a lot more talent than she did coming out of high school, right? Ideally, the ceiling is much higher for Madden Greenway. That's what you would think. That's what you would hope. Again, Kenny Brooks has not had a freshman point guard, as good as Madden Greenway in his coaching career. So I think there's definitely this idea that Madden Greenway, I would say almost no matter what, is your starting point guard next season, unless she gets hurt in the preseason. God forbid that happens. But I would say you can just almost just go ahead and pencil her in as the starting point guard. As things stand, the rest of my starting five is going down. I think Asia Boone comes back and starts at the 2. I think Kaylin Carroll comes back and starts at the 3. I think with Kaylin Carroll, she showed enough promise to be a starter. I think this offseason, obviously, she'd be competing for a starting spot. And, she would have experience over Savvy Swords or an Emily McDonald. I don't think you can start someone like Dawn Perova. Again, unless she has an insane offseason. I don't know if you can start someone like Dawn Perova because she's been injured for 2 years. I think I would say almost whatever you get from her now, it might be a bonus, right? If she's your 7th man, that you probably feel really, really good about that, honestly. So, again, I have Kaylin Carroll at the 3. I don't have her at the 4 because, number 1, in my eyes, I just kind of see her as the Amelia Hassett replacement, right? I kind of talked about Madden Greenway like, you're Georgia Amore, but more talented coming to, entering your freshman year. I kind of feel like Kaylin Carroll is this more talented Amelia Hassett, right? I think Amelia Hassett's a better three-point shooter. I think we figured that out this past year. But, Kaylin can knock it down. She had some good games. I think it was against Central Michigan, actually, where Kaylin Carroll had a really good three-point game. She has a Topps card I think I have back there. She can shoot it, but another reason I don't have her at the 4, I think Kentucky just wants a bit bigger size at the 4, which, I was talking about Darrington from Central Michigan. That would make me a little skeptical on her, unless she's a bench piece, but I don't think she'd be transferring to be a bench piece. So, again, my first 3 players in the starting 5, Madden Greenway, Asia Boone, Kaylin Carroll. Clara Strack is obviously in the starting lineup. I have her penciled in as the 5. Again, we talked about, is there the possibility that she's moved to the small or power forward, right? Could she slot up and then they get a 6'6" kid? And they might get a 6'6" kid, but I think they're going to keep her at center. I really just don't see Clara Strack being moved. This is a question that I'm getting a lot, which is, shout out to Shannon, commenting saying, is there any chance Kenny Brooks looks at Gracie Merkel? Now, obviously, if you don't know, Gracie Merkel, entering the transfer portal from Penn State, went to Bullitt East High School here in Kentucky, had a phenomenal high school career, started her collegiate career at Bellarmine, was a star there. She, this year at Penn State, I want to say it's 19.8-ish points, over 7 rebounds, but she shot 72% from the field, which I believe led the country, right? Very efficient scorer down low. There have been, obviously, a lot of people wondering, can Kentucky go after Gracie Merkel? I won't tell you it's 0, right? But I think for her to come to Kentucky, Clara Streck would have to slide to the 4 because she's proven she can average 20 and 7 at a Power 4 school. She's going to want to start, right? So my number one thing is, would they want to move Clara Streck to the 4? Okay, there's check number 1. There's a few more checks I think you have to go down. Check number 2, does she just seem like someone who would fit, right? Audie Crooks announced she intends to enter the transfer portal. When you look on paper, man, it'd be awesome to have this kid that scores, what does that say? 25 points per game. But, she just wouldn't work in the SEC. She wouldn't work at Kentucky, right? I love Audie to death. Think she's great for the game, great for, the attention the game gets. She's a defensive mega liability, right? I hate it because it's hating on the women's game, but there are videos online that dude, she doesn't play defense. And that doesn't, you think that's going to work under Kenny Brooks, where he emphasizes length and size so much on the defensive end and, and athleticism? You think any of that's Audie Crooks, right? She's only 6'3", so she's shorter than Claire. It just wouldn't fit here. Now, Gracie Merkel, the difference with her, she's 6'6". Okay, she has the SEC size. She's got that part down. It's just, do we think she can hang defensively? I hate to bring it up. Is the conditioning there? Right? All these things. She did okay in the Big Ten. SEC is a little bit faster. Right? A little bit more athletic. A little bit more physical. Can she do it to that level in the SEC? I don't know. Personally, I would not look at Gracie Merkel as a target. I've dug into it a little bit. It doesn't look like it, but I won't tell you it's a 0% chance. So it's not one I'm monitoring closely like some of these other names, but I'll keep it in the back of my head. I won't say, again, there's no shot she ends up at Kentucky. I don't think she would. I don't think she'll end up in the SEC, especially someone, like Audie Crooks too. I don't think either of them are going to end up in the SEC. Maybe, maybe they do. I don't know. But I just don't see it, and I don't really see it with Kentucky. And then power forward, right? Because I talked about how I don't think the entire starting 5 is here. I think Kenny Brooks goes out and gets a 6'4" plus transfer, and it's a bonus if she can shoot the 3, right? You're going to get, I think ideally, what you're looking for when you go get your power forward, what I think is going to happen, right, with this offseason. Kenny Brooks is going to go in the portal and say, I would love to have someone who is Tiani Key plus Amelia Hassett. 6'5", athletic, can rebound, can defend, plus, Amelia's a great defender too, but plus the 3-point shooting, right? Bam, put that together. That would be perfect, right? I think what's going to end up happening, he's going to try to do that, but it's also, okay, let's try to get more size, right? If it's a Tiani Key or Amelia at the 4, I think he's going to go with more Tiani Key. I think he'll sacrifice the 3-point shooting a little bit if that means, that he's got another big body down there, hopefully long, athletic body that can defend. Again, 3-point shooting would be nice, but you've got a plethora of guards. You've got Emily McDonald, Bonam Perova, Asia Boone. You should be able to shoot the ball. And, of course, Clara Streck can step out and hit it, even though she's not the most efficient 3-point shooter in the world. So I don't think Kenny will be dying for a 3-point shooter at the 4, but it would be nice. But I think at the end of the day, he's going to be looking for size. And to me, again, to kind of go back and rehash my starting 5, to me, at the moment, I would say my starting 5 prediction is Madden Greenway at the 1, Asia Boone at shooting guard, Kaylin Carroll at small forward, some 6'4" plus transfer that I just described, right? And then at center, Clara Streck. That's my prediction on that. So, again, it's going to be an interesting offseason because unlike last year, I'm not expecting a ton of movement, right? I'm not expecting 3 or 4 kids to enter the portal. I wasn't totally expecting, like, I kind of thought Elsa might stick it around based on what I've heard, but now that she's gone, I think this is going to be about it for the portal entries, right? Normally, you kind of sit here and say, Phoenix, I want more news. Well, I think actually not getting news on that front might be good, right? I think it might be a not so bad thing. You know, it's going to really break my heart if I have to see an Asia Boone entering the portal graphic, or if I have to see, you know, a Kaylin Carroll entering the portal graphic. It's going to really hurt my soul. I don't expect that to happen. I think with Lexi Blue and Elsa Vadfors, I would currently expect those are the only 2. Obviously, we went over some names that I think Kentucky could go after. And then real quickly, portal needs. Again, I think you need that Amelia Hassett, Tiani Key replacement, but some depth in the backcourt and really in general would be nice too. With those 2 leaving, like I said, Kentucky has 8 total players on the roster now, if I remember right, 7 rotational pieces. So ideally, he's going to get, I would say, anywhere from, if there's 8 kids on the roster, hopefully 3 to 4 kids, maybe 2 to 4. But at the end of the day, I think we can feel pretty confident that Kentucky can go after who they need to. I was really encouraged with Kenny Brooks' comments after the Texas game, talking about how, you know, I thought it was interesting. He said you didn't have to have the most money in the world to compete, but at the same time, Kenny Brooks, you know, he wasn't sitting there being complacent, right? He was like, I'm going to ask until they tell me no. I'm going to keep fighting for our program. And I loved his quote about how, you know, we're a sleeping giant, and I think we're doing a good job of tickling that giant to kind of wake it up a little bit. So, again, I think there's plenty of reason to get excited about this offseason. We'll be back next week, and hopefully we've got more news. Hopefully we have some new faces to talk about. That would be awesome. But, again, I just want to thank you all so much for joining because it's going to be, I think, a wild ride, right? It may not be the wildest of rides, right? Like I said, I'm not expecting 100 more entries from Kentucky, but we got to add some names. We got to figure out, is this a championship roster or not? You know, I remember this past offseason, not this one, but the year before, obviously, where, you know, they talked about SEC champs on 3, 1, 2, 3 SEC champs. You know, let's go do that, right? Let's go actually take that next step of, you know, instead of just making it to Friday in the SEC tournament, how do we get to Saturday? How do we get to Sunday and maybe win the SEC championship? For Kentucky in the NCAA tournament, how do we make the Elite Eight, the furthest we've ever made it, right? Would be our 5th one. How do we set the standard of hosting every year? How do we, like I said, get to that Elite Eight? And then, of course, the ultimate goals. How do we get to Kentucky's first ever Final Four? How does Kentucky win its first ever national championship? That stuff all begins right now. Like I said, I think the real Kenny Brooks era starts basically right now, really starts on the 6th when the portal opens. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Didn't have time to really go through them all, but the comments were going off in this video. I really appreciate you all so much for sticking around. Again, like, comment, subscribe. I would appreciate it a lot. Stephen Peak, I know he'd appreciate it a ton. I'm sure he's nodding his head on the other side of his screen right now, right? Again, thank you all so much for tuning in. It means a whole lot to me, Steve, and the rest of us here at KSR. And again, when we come back here this time next week, we're going to have more news. So don't go anywhere. Help us get the 60K subscribers. And until next time, peace out and go Cats.